I'm a little late to this party. Cocoon came out September 2023, won some awards, whatever. I bought it when it was on sale a little after all that, and I only got around to playing it yesterday. I bought it because of the discount and because I had heard good things about it. That's why I wasn't super excited to play it. That's why it's been so long. I really didn't expect it to have a massive impact on me. But oh boy, did it ever leave an impact. Cocoon, if you're unfamiliar, was last year's indie darling. This puzzle adventure game was directed by Jep Carlson. Does that name sound familiar? No, probably not, but you do know what he's worked on before. Jep was also the lead designer on Limbo and Inside. But I thought Cocoon got its gold ribbon as a debut indie. Why, yes it did! Jep left Playdead to found Geometric Interactive, meaning Cocoon technically qualifies. If you ask me, that goes a little against the spirit of the competition. Sure, it's a new studio, but the guy making all the decisions also made all the decisions for one of the most prolific indies of all time. But whatever. Playing through Cocoon, you can really feel the DNA of Playdead's previous games. So can it live up to its predecessors? No! Spoilers, but I did not like Cocoon very much. Cocoon is the hardest I've seen a game be carried by its visuals and atmosphere in a while. Credit where credit is due, I think the visual and audio design of the game is legitimately quite impressive. The color palette is incredibly vibrant, and the geometry is super simple. This makes for a very readable, almost graphic design-y look to the game, which is really pleasant to look at. Dare I say, almost a timeless aesthetic. You play as an insect in a biomechanical world. Most aspects of nature have merged in some way with industry, or all technology and even some static props have a pulse in them, whichever interpretation you prefer. Most of the game world and all mechanisms in it are also symmetrical. This door and this area are particular highlights. I really like all of these aesthetic choices, and I think they really help reinforce the theming. I interpret this to be an extension of how we supposedly see mathematical and geometric concepts in nature, like how we see the Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio in plants and other natural phenomena. Insects especially can look man-made at times. Look at the geometry and symmetry that most bugs have. Cocoon doesn't have a traditional narrative. There is no dialogue or text at all in the game. Everything is communicated silently through visuals. I believe all this supports a common interpretation of the game, that the worlds you travel are all trials that will allow you to ascend to godhood. A metamorphosis from insectoid to something greater. A cocoon, if you will. The imagery of these massive vaults containing other godlike entities in their own cocoon supports this as well, I think. It's a minor point, but I also enjoyed the audio design. The use of adaptive music was great. They timed this awesome, inspiring track to play whenever the moment of realization happens during a puzzle. During my playtime, it didn't even feel like it was tied to a specific action or input. It really felt like whenever my brain solved the puzzle, the music would just go off. I would be really curious how they pulled that one off. Gameplay is where this game suffers. Again, they're both negative and positives, and I'm more of a glass half full kind of guy, so let's start with what they did right. The main gimmick, for lack of a better word, is quite cool. You carry an orb on your back, and this orb is a world of its own. You enter this world, and the world has its own puzzles. Later you gain access to more worlds, and the best puzzles involve stacking worlds within worlds.
And Jesus wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
Paired with the visuals, I imagine this elevator pitch is what made the game take off like it did. Once you clear a hurdle within an orb's world, that orb gives you an ability as you carry it. The first one, for example, imposes these holographic walkways into the world. I thought this especially was a really good mechanic. A very smart way to non-intrusively tell a player you need to bring an orb with you for an upcoming area, as you need to carry an orb to get the ability. During the first hour or so, I thought the game was really good at naturally leading you using methods like that. The problem is that Guide in Hand never really went away. So I have one main problem with Cocoon's gameplay, and for a 3.5 hour game, it's kind of a big deal. It really feels like the game is trying to waste your time. This manifests in the puzzle design and the world design mainly. First off, the puzzles are just really easy. To my memory, I really only had to stop and think about what I was doing twice maybe in the game? This in itself isn't a huge problem, and just being easy definitely doesn't make it a waste of time. I can understand that the game was being targeted to people who didn't necessarily like puzzle games. My issue is that most puzzles repeat themselves. By around the halfway point, with the exception of the final puzzle, every solution has more or less already been seen, Once you solve a puzzle, every puzzle for the next half hour has a slightly different spin on the same solution. While there is a spin on it, ultimately it's the same concept, and it has a very similar execution. After almost 4 hours and who knows how many puzzles, it felt like I really only had about 6 tools in my old thinking cap. Once you get the orange ability, every puzzle relates to changing the holographic pathway in the same way. Once you get the green ability, every puzzle involves manipulating the elevator to go up or down in the same way. And once you get the gun, every puzzle is how you use that to activate the green power in the same roundabout way. The tedium of solving the same puzzles amplified by how slow the mechanisms of the puzzles operate. Even something as simple as these fleshy switches takes so long to move. It gets really bad when you start having to navigate through multiple worlds and storing worlds within worlds. I almost dropped the game on what turned out to be the penultimate puzzle, when I realized it was really gonna make me jump into one world, take a world out of that, swap it with the previous world so I can enter that one instead, then walk for like a minute to get to the world I actually need, then walk back with that on my back. It is very frustrating when you almost immediately know the solution, but you have to meander around for a while to put those pieces into place. If the game was more difficult, I suspect this would have been fine, as I would have wanted to go back so I can experiment with all the tools I have anyways. Oh my god, I didn't even talk about the boss fights. Well, that might be because there's not actually that much to talk about. Near the end of a world, you need to complete the most mind-numbing fight against the guardians of that world. These fights range from the easiest reflex challenge to the easiest bullet hell game. It's hard to even complain about reflex and bullet hell segments being too easy, because why are they even there in the first place? The bosses most certainly exist to switch things up a little, help the pacing a bit. In my mind, a boss is a relevant challenge that tests you on what you've learned up to this point. Well, this is an exploration puzzle game, so why aren't we testing those skills? Ironically, this is something Limbo and Inside did quite well. They really knew how to apply pressure on the player during puzzle segments. That spider and hairy merman thing really were able to raise tension during what would otherwise be just normal gameplay. My last time wasting Grievance is maybe a little weird, like if I heard somebody else say this I would call them a dirty nitpicker, but while playing it really started to irritate me. So the world design has lots of dead ends. Like, a lot of the environment were made with aesthetics purely in mind without thought into how someone would explore this space. For example, in one of the first rooms, we're in this chamber, visually they wanted it to be symmetrical, but they didn't block off the walkable area. So you have to walk all the way around to realize this area serves no purpose and that you just guessed wrong on which direction was the right way. Not a huge deal if this only happens a few times, but this happens constantly in Cocoon. The most egregious are those walkways I was praising earlier. Every single one of these segments has multiple forks in the road that lead to a dead end for no reason. And these walkways are all over the place in Cocoon. It's just annoying world design to the point of being bad. And I could have learned to deal with that, but really early on Cocoon establishes there's going to be little secrets along the way, so exploration is incentivized, meaning you kind of have to walk through all these nebulous pathways. Combined with the general time wasting in the core gameplay, I legitimately think these design decisions were made to increase the length of the game so that players couldn't refund after beating it. In my playtime, I spent about 3.5 hours. If I didn't take all these optional sideways and some of the puzzles were cut down a little bit to get rid of the repeated patterns, it easily could have been beaten in 2 hours. Cocoon, despite a really cool gameplay hook, lacks any real depth. While the world was very visually interesting, exploring it was beyond tedious. After playing it, I am extremely disappointed by how highly praised it was. I know the Game Awards are stupid and I shouldn't care, but it's really upsetting that, especially in the debut indie category, all the good press went to Cocoon. A boring puzzler that really just wanted to be an art book, created by an already very well-established game developer. It's just kind of silly. That's a C tier from me.